Coogs in Public Office is a series of interviews with elected officials who are alumni of our program. Our discussions focus on the path to victory in public office, tips for aspiring politicians, what you should be learning and reading in your political science classes, and much more.
So Sean Skipworth, welcome to Coogs in Public Office. Thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Yeah.
So Sean, you were the mayor of Dickinson, newly elected mayor, I should say, and you were a graduate of our program in 2008 from our master's program. Congratulations on your election. Could you just get us started by just saying telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So again, I'm Sean Skipworth, and as you noted, I graduated from the graduate program at U of H in political science back in 2008. I started in 2005. It did that, and I'm a professor over at College of the Mainland here at the community college in Galveston County, one of them, and I've lived out here, and that's pretty much what I've been doing the last since I graduated. So teaching in academia, and so I got elected to city council here in 2019, and then ran for mayor the following year and got elected. And of course, there was a little bit of, it was, I wouldn't say unique, but an interesting outcome where we had a dead tie following a runoff where we each had 1,010 votes, which, yes, that does add up to 2020, which I heard all the jokes about the year from hell and how the vote total added up. And I won by drawing a ball out of a hat from a neighboring mayor. They were actually the balls that the city secretary uses for beer pong in her garage, she told me later. But they did sanitize those, and now they're going to put them up somewhere in City Hall. So who would have thought? But anyway,
this does happen occasionally.
It does. So it does. So that's kind of how I ended up here. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what made you interested in public office in the first place.
So, kind of always had been interested just in politics in general. And as far as running for public office, a lot of it was post-Harvey, especially here in Dickinson. Reports vary, but probably something like 90% of the town was flooded during Harvey. It was hit particularly bad here. And so, you get in there and you often after a disaster or something, right, some polarizing event, people kind of become a little more engaged. And so I was one of those people and started looking at city government. And of course, we always talk about voting participation is low in local government. Well, just participation, of course, is even worse, right? That you tend to get the same people in office for years. They don't have challengers a lot of times. The elections are canceled. So you just, you see some apathy in city government, and I just kind of the classic, I was, just Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of, I'm just fed up with this, I feel like I should do something. But a lot of that Harvey was a big kind of motivating event. Also working at the college here locally, especially a community college, you do end up being really active in the surrounding community. So you get to know people there. And that can give you some ins also into some of the local, the local notables. So a lot of those things that kind of brought me in there.
Did you start teaching before you went to the public office route, or was
yes.
It vice versa?
I was sort of one of those full, professional adjuncts driving all over Houston from 2009 until 2012, and then I got a full-time job at that point. So yeah, pretty much been teaching ever since I graduated.
Good. So let's shift to talking about the skills that may have been helpful for you in winning office, or at least to your success thus far. Would be of interest, I think, to our students. But maybe you could speak to a little bit about kind of what skills that you've found essential that you've used that were instrumental to you.
Sure. It's cliche to say it, but communication is really key, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. Communication in terms of, can you actually have a conversation with a regular person, right? An average person. So kind of cultural awareness, cultural competence, and that can mean a lot of things. Understanding who you're talking to, what your audience is. So being able to communicate and to do it in a way that you don't set off any inherent biases that they have. And the same thing, that you don't respond too much when they say something that maybe is totally objectionable to you, right? That you have this ability to say, okay, well, let's just forget about that and Pretend you're not, a racist, which sometimes things like that would happen. So you sort of nod and find something to agree with. But communication in that sense, being able to just talk to somebody, that kind of that retail politics, shaking hands, but also communication in the sense of, especially in the social media era, that even with city government, I'd say it's almost more crucial. That when I was on council, people would ask, what's going on with this popular local grocery store? I get asked this all the time. And so saying when something happens or during a natural disaster, just going on Facebook and posting, even if you don't have a lot of updates, people really want that. And so that kind of ability to communicate and to do it clearly is something super important. I'd also say just kind of having some basic understanding of how data works also, and then combining that with communication, whether you're looking at data in terms of running for office or when you're analyzing data when you're in office, being able to actually communicate that out in a clear way, find what's important, what isn't, that's really crucial. So understanding your audience is big and all of that. But essentially at the end of the day, it's about communication. If people know you, they will probably support you and support the things that you're trying to do. So really can't stress that enough. And then that cultural awareness of what's going on and how to navigate that.
Yeah, and you got a master's degree with us. I mean, did you find that you developed these skills? I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of these skills already, but did you feel like you developed them in a master's degree here? Or I mean, maybe you could speak to, students who are interested in a master's degree in general in political science.
Right.
What's your advice for them? I mean, do you feel what could be of use for a master's degree?
I think there's a lot of stuff that's of use. Now, it isn't that road of political science and running for office isn't all that common. You don't tend to see it much. But it's the joke about Woodrow Wilson, was the only political scientist that got elected to president, for instance. But you don't tend to see that much. But that said, there's skills there. There's innumerable things that you read that in grad school, for instance, or even subsequently that you look at that help you. And I can there's a use to that, just the knowledge that you gain about things about public policy, about behavior, the way what people care about, what they don't. That all helps you. I will say that one thing that comes up, and I think we know this conceptually, is that people don't know much about politics. That's not there's maybe not too many absolute truths we can say in political science, but that's probably one of them, right? People in general have low information, right? And it's one thing to understand that intellectually sitting in a grad program, and it's even something to notice that when you teach. I remember the first class I taught after I got out of grad school, you kind of came from like the heights of sitting in a seminar and talking about, ooh, what's this new paper that came out, and what is such and such doing? And then you go to a room and there, the class is like, Congress, is that one the House or the Senate? Which one is that one in? And you're like, wow, how far I've fallen, right? In those terms. But take that level, and then in the public, it's even less. And it is really something to be confronted with that in person, where people have literally no idea what they're talking about. So I'm not knocking having a degree. I might come off that way. That isn't it. But it's important to take that knowledge and then to truly understand the limitations of it and really think about how to make it useful and to get it to people. Kind of back to that communication thing and that cultural awareness. How do you bring that up? But certainly understanding things about elections, how elections work, the basis on which people make their votes, what matters to them, what doesn't. I mean, all of those things are useful and give you a leg up, especially in a local race where most people that run are fairly amateurish, that they go to some barbecues and chamber of commerce events and they call that good. But kind of in grad school studying, whether it's campaigning or whatever, and understanding like, hey, here's how campaigns work, here's what people care about, here's how to target, all of that comes into play for sure. So I can't point to like one thing, but during the course of your career, I mean, I think all these things sort of come together and definitely help you when you come in. So
yeah, that's great. This shifts in the direction of sort of the advice for students.
Okay.
So like, applying the knowledge they've gained to the practical world. Maybe you'd say a little bit more about what advice you might have for a student who is interested in running for public office. office? What do you think they should do if they're a current student? What do you think they should be doing? Or right after they graduate, what do you think they should be doing to achieve
success? First thing I'd say is there's a lot of focus on these like higher offices running for Congress, or even like in Harris County, you know, Linda Hidalgo gets elected and she's very young, and everybody says, oh, I'm going to be Linda Hidalgo, I'm going to go run and I'm going to be a 27-year-old county judge. You're probably not, right? You're not going to be Barack Obama and be the president in your 40s, probably not. So there's something to be said for, you know, when you finish graduate school, you're going to go live somewhere, and maybe you know where that is, maybe you don't know where that is, because you'll have to see where the job market takes you. But you know, a suburb, small towns, don't knock it, right? If you want to get in there, you can, if that's your path, think about that part of it. Can you live in a community of a sufficiently small size that you can essentially get elected? So, you know, voter turnout is 10% or less, you know, if you're lucky in a local election. A pool like this, I knocked on probably 1,500 unique doors myself, plus duplications when it comes to get out the vote and runoffs and things like that. A person can physically do that in a 5-6 month campaign by yourself or with a few volunteers. And that ability to do that is what makes all the difference, because if people know you, they will tend to vote for you. That's not a guarantee, but you know, they like that connection. So that's one thing I'd think about, is thinking about where you're going to go to run. You know, another thing is, along with that, you know, on Facebook, there's these groups, you know, talk of whatever, you know, like here it's talk of Dickinson, and then there's talk around Dickinson. Then there's Dickinson Community News. Join all of those groups and just lurk and read what they say, because those groups really do give you insight into the community and what they care about. As inane as it can be in there, you'll see certain stretches of road that people always complain about, or some issue, or they want a certain kind of park, or whatever it is. So that really is a good way to see the pulse of what happens, at least anecdotally, and just look at it, and you'll start to catch the themes that come in there. And that's, you know, relatively new phenomenon, you know, 10 years or so now, but that's really established now. Another thing on that note, social media use is all over the place. And there's a line from The Godfather about this, you know, where the Godfather gets onto Sonny, right? And he says, don't ever tell anyone outside the family what you're thinking again. That's true on social media also. One of the first things that I did before I ran for city council in 2019 was I went through my Facebook, and this was an arduous task. There is a way to do it. And I deleted every single post that I ever made that might be considered political, that you could look at one way or the other. It does you no good to put it out there. It feels good, and I don't know why I even did it at the time, you know, not sure what it accomplished, but that will just be used against you in some way. I promise you, it won't help you. It will just be used against you. Don't lay those positions out there, so that way when you run, you can say who you are and what that is, because if you don't, someone's going to find that stuff, and they'll find something you said, and either it's out of context or not, but it'll get weaponized against you. That's just kind of the nature of where we are. Kind of tale of two races. In League City, the neighboring town, a woman there got 49 point something % in the general, and so it went to runoff. She ended up losing by a large margin. The local, in this case the Republican Party, spent 5 figures on a local city council race and just weaponized her as a socialist, because she had a few cases where she door knocked for a Democratic candidate. Especially in these local races where they're not partisan, hey, don't make it partisan. You know, don't lay that out there. If you don't have to put on gang colors, don't do it. And just kind of thread the middle there and be coy about it, and go there. That's really the way to go, especially depending where you live, right? A lot of the area out here, suburbs tend to be conservative, at least in Galveston County. That's the case. So it's good to kind of take a neutral tone like that. So, you know, those are some things I do right now, but same thing, go to council meetings, just kind of pay attention to what's going on. Just sit in the back and listen. A lot of them are on Zoom now. Put them on and just sort of hear what's going on, and you can kind of get a sense of what's happening and figure out if you want to run. Is there a seat you want to run for? Is it going to be vacant? Is somebody there, the wounded animal limping in the back that you can pick off? You know, just doing a little prep work like that well in advance before anybody knows you're thinking about it. So that way you can kind of come in, you know, and take everybody by surprise and get in there. So
yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask.
Okay.
Ask elected officials. So what book or
Right.
books have influenced how you think about politics?
Sure. So I love the question.
Maybe a book you like.
I don't reflect on
Go
this
ahead.
stuff too much, so you gave me a good opportunity to think, what did I really, it's been a while since I was in graduate school, and I've done some reading since then, but especially in community college, it's very teaching oriented. So I don't do that as much. So thinking about it, I made a short list here of some books and also maybe in one case an author. I found Bowling Alone. I know that it has its detractors and all of that, but there's a lot of truth to it, and at least say anecdotally in terms of this disengagement, social isolation and things like that. I still think it's a good one to look at. Also, I was a sucker. I was critical when we first read it, but I've come to like it more. A Theory of Justice with Rawls. I always liked that one. The book has a good smell to it too. I don't know what it was. There's a certain smell to that edition of the book.
And it's a long one too.
It is a long one, but I think you only
busy.
need to. It starts to repeat itself at the end, so you can read about. I used to have it marked in there, about half of it or so. Then at the end, you're missing out. But read the beginning, if nothing else. But it is quite long. You're right. Another one like that, The Republic. It just a class. I mean, of course, just a classic. But I think about anecdotes from that all of the time. I use the story at the beginning where it's kind of funny, right? Where they're talking to one of the older men, and he says, "Well, you've been really wise. What do you have to tell us?" And he says, "Well, when you get older, everybody, they're always off at the temple because they're worried about dying, attending to the sacrifices, and they're trying to make up for all the bad stuff they did in their life." And then he says, "Well, I got to go attend to the sacrifices, right?" So there's a lot of subtle humor like that. I remember, but there's a lot of things that will just a situation will come up, and I'll say, "Oh, that was in the Republic," or that's like that. A couple other ones. The Art of War by Sun Tzu is another useful one. Two things. There's two parts of that famous quotes from that book I always think about. One is where he says that war is, I'm paraphrasing, war is a moral contest, decided before the first battle is even fought. That's true in a campaign too. Are you willing to go? How far are you willing to go? I don't mean anything nefarious, but are you committed to win? You're committed to win. And in my case, our election was a dead tie. I was literally out at 6:30 when the polls closed at 7, and I got a guy in my neighborhood to go out and vote, like in the rain with his kids at the last minute. And I remember telling my wife, she goes, "Are you coming back?" I said, "No, I feel like I need to still be doing this. There's some mystic force, God or the universe or something." And sure enough, it ended up being a tie, right? So, if you're, it's a moral contest, right? Before you start, am I going to go the distance or not? And then another one I think we forget about in politics a lot is Sun Tzu says, "Give your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across." All right, this is always good, that there's people that you're at odds with, and you can't just create this confrontational situation. So you've got to find a way to do that. And one for a bonus, I said 2, but 3. Never stop your enemy from destroying himself. Right, that when, especially in politics, you see somebody doing something stupid and you're running against them. Usually the best thing to do is just to shut up and just let it happen, right? Don't intervene, right? Just let it happen. And then 2 more. Edmund Burke in general, writing about classical conservatism. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily a proponent of that. And I know, again, he has his detractors too, of course, but particularly he I think in a very eloquent way talks about the need for change to occur slowly when you compare the American Revolution and the French Revolution, right? Where those were tale of two revolutions and their structure and how they came about. And he writes about those fairly well, but that's good advice for running for office when you are proposing things and then actually being in office and thinking about how to do things. And then the last one, I think it's a seminal that, everybody reads, The Presidential Power by Neustadt. Everybody reads that one. The power of persuasion stuff, again, that is, I found it as good practical advice in being in government, trying to buy in. But there's a lot of people that are in local government, just like state, federal, that they do think that everything is just giving orders and then you bark out and things happen. And that really is not how it ever works at all. So those are a few that jumped to my mind when I went through. So a lot of those are classics, I think, in terms of political science. But yeah,
those are great choices. I love them. Well, great. Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining us, and I really appreciate hearing your experience, sharing it with our students. So thanks for being on Coogs in Public Office.
Loved it. Thanks.